Good evening, welcome in RNQ Zeno classes unit number 3 matter and form. 3.1 introduction. Hylomorphism, the classical theory of matter and form, is derived from the Greek word highly matter and morphe form. This theory is Aristotle seeks to explain the essential constitutions of a corporeal substance in terms of a twofold principle: prime matter and substantial form. Prime matter is material and indeterminate, and substantial form is formal and determining. 3.2 classical views. Plato distinguished between matter and form, but Aristotle is the author of the hylomorphism. H.T. Augustine held a theory of matter and form, but the importance of hylomorphism was not realized before the Middle Ages. Scholastic philosophers adopted Aristotle's. Although they differed in their interpretations of it, the pure potentiality of matter was denied by Duns Scotus, but defined on Aquinas and his followers. Suarez calls matter pure potency, but attributes a kind of actual existence to it. Albert the Great, the nominalist, and Suez denied the necessity of an interesting principles of limitations regarding the principles of individuations. Scotus sought the solutions in adding the specific the form of theisness, which the formally distinct from the specific nature but actual on the part of the thing. Thus normalist formally distinct from the specific nature but actual on the part of the thing. The normalist denied that there is any basis for the problem of individuation. Suarez held that an essence is individual by its very entity. Plato and Aristotle appealed to matter. H.T. Thomas developed Aristotle's theories by adding to matter qualification marked by quantity. Will the entire Thomistic schools admits this formula. There is a difference of opinion about its interpretations and even about the sense which H.T. Thomas ultimately intended to give to it. So, Sylvesters of Ferrari, 1474 to 1528, followed by Boyer and Renard, explain this quantity as the actual quantity of a body. Was Cajetan 1469 to 1534, and more recently Rimmer, Graded, and Phillips explain as it is. The transcendental relations of matter of quantity. Rosmini 1797 to 1855 and some others have tried to explain the individuations by means of existence. 3.3 Scientific views. Our normal tendency is to depict matter and the material world as we observe it, but the theories of quantum mechanics and relativity critically challenge our way of looking at matter. Quantum mechanics, a branch of physics, deals with the movement of bodies. Quantum mechanics deals with the movement of quantum particles. It was developed in the 1920s by an international group of physicists, including Niels Bohr 1922 2009 from Denmark, Lars de Broglie 1892 to 1987 from France, Erwin Schrödinger, and Wolfgang Pauli from Austria, Werner Heisenberg from Germany, and Paul Dirac from England. The subject matter of quantum physics includes the movement of particles, certain creations of particles, restrictions of particles, interactions between particles, the way atoms are tied to the nucleus, the nuclear forces, the properties of particles, the conceptions of the beginning of the universe as a great quantum leap, etc. The theory begins with Max Planck, physics, who brought forth the first critical idea of the quantum theory in 1900. This theory states that energy absorptions and emissions take place in discrete quantities Qantas in his view, as continuous view of the world must be replaced by a discrete one. The different forms of energy in the different form of the energy in the universe are discrete and acceptable. The to know quantum mechanics is to know the subatomic world, which is a world of puzzles, paradoxes, and perplexities ruled by chaos, randomness, and probabilities. And subatomic units of matter have dual aspects. They appear sometimes as practicals and other times as behaves as waves. This is a very strange property of matter understood in terms of probabilities. Probability means we can never predict an atomic event with certainty. Mechanical stability of practicals it is yet another puzzle whereby atoms colliding millions of times every second will return to the original form after a collision. Again, subject distinction of the microscopic world does not exist clearly in the microscopic world. These principles of classical physics collide with the new concept of intermediacy, randomness, and unpredictability. The development of quantum physics marks the beginning of the age of the new physics, radically altering the physicist conceptions of reality. The new visions of matter in quantum physics is generally termed as the philosophy of quantum mechanics. Up to fundamental principles of quantum physics are the principles of complementarity and the principles of uncertainty. The principles of complementarity proposed by Niels Bohr was meant to explain the wave practical duality of light. According to his principle, wave and practical are mutually exclusive but complementary aspects of light. They are mutually exclusive in the sense that when one is manifest, the other is not manifest. According to the principles of identity, indeterminacy of the uncertainty principles of Heisenberg, it is impossible to determine exactly both the positions and momentum of particle at the same time. Relativity. The relativity theory of relativity proposed by Albert Einstein 1879 to 1955 is one of the most significant scientific advances of our time. The central problem in physics is in 19th century was concerned with resolving the problem of Newton's actions at a distance and the wave propagations of light. It was necessary to postulate a medium first to transmit force between two bodies and then as a medium for light to travel as a trans wave. Einstein's inventive theory as a solution to this problem gave rise to the theory of relativity, which holds that a concept like mass, motions, length, time, simultaneously, etc., are not absolute but relative. They are relative to the frame of reference. There are two kinds of relativity theories. The special theory of relativity and the general theory of relativity. Special relativity discusses situations when bodies move with a uniform velocity. There are two postulates that are central to the special theory of relativity. The first states that there is no privileged frame of the reference. All frames of reference which are moving with uniform velocity with regard to each other equivalent, and therefore the laws of physics are equally applicable in all frames of reference. The second postulate holds constancy of the velocity of light, which is an absolute universal constant, as the maximum interaction speed between two bodies is the speed of light, and this is independent of the motions of the source of the observer. According to the first postulate, in all natural events are unaffected by uniform motions. Motion makes sense only when referred to a frame of reference. There is no absolute length, time and mass. These have different values and different frames of reference. Reference the special theory of relativity also holds that
ଏନେ ମଞ୍ଜି ଗଜା ଆଉ ଖାଇଥିଲୁ ରସଗୋଲା ଆଉ କୋଉଠି ହେଲା ନା ଚାକିରି ବାକିରି ଲୋକଙ୍କର ଉତ୍ପାତ ନୀତିରୁ ଲୋକ ଏବେ ଆମର ଲୋକ ଉତ୍ପାତ ହେଲେ
hold that those events which are simultaneous in one frame of reference need not be simultaneous elsewhere. It also limits the maximum speed of interactions to the velocity of light. Nothing can move faster than light, and if anything moves faster than light, it would contract to nothing. Relativity of length and relativity of time are two important consequences of the spatial theory of relativity. Length is not something absolute in the sense that it has same value for all persons at all places. Length is relative depending on the frame of reference. For instance, the length of a road is 4 feet when measured by a stationary observer. The same road will have a length less than 4 feet when it is placed in a fast moving frame of reference like a superspace shuttle. For the stationary observer, time also is relative of moving slows down with respect to a stationary observer. This means that if two exactly identical clocks are synchronized, but one is kept in a stationary frame of reference and the other in a moving one, the second one will show a lower reading than the first. Not only clocks, all other time related phenomena to slow down in a moving frame of reference. According to this theory, there is no absolute past, present, or future applicable to the cosmos as a whole. Similarly, two events that are simultaneous in one frame of reference need to be so in another frame of reference. Relativity of mass and the equivalence of mass and energy are another amazing twin consequence of the special theory of relativity. Einstein also showed that mass to varied being relative to the frame of reference of moving body has a greater mass than a stationary one. Perhaps the most far-reaching consequence was the mass energy equivalence, according to which mass and energy are interconvertible. Mass can be converted into energy. Is equal to mc2. Energy depends on its internal interior mass and the velocity, and therefore energy can increase either with the increase or of mass or velocity. The general theory of relativity is the theory of gravitation, which deals with bodies with accelerated motions, not on non-uniform motion. The concept of accelerated motions consists of change in speed or change in directions. The two postulates for the general theory of relativity is the principles of equivalence and gravity, which is defined as the curvature of space-time continuum, The first postulate signifies the equivalence, equivalence of accelerated motions and gravity. The second postulate of the general theory of relativity defines gravity as a geometrical property by which the presence of a huge mass can curve the space-time continuum. This aspect of relativity see gravity not as a force as held by Newton between bodies, but as a geometrical property. A significant result of the theory of relativity is the happy blending of classical metaphysics and modern physics. Classical metaphysics views matter, prime matter, as the principles of indeterminations and form as the principle of determinations. Matter in itself it is capable of receiving any form. Matter remains relative to or form. This fundamental nature of relativity and indeterminacy of matter is the ultimate metaphysical foundations of the physical theories of quantum mechanics and relativity. Thus, the classical conceptions of prime matter as the principles of indeterminations continues to be relevant in the context of the new findings of physics. 3.4 prime matter. All material beings possess a principle of materiality. It is not a being all at all but a principle of material beings as such. Hence it can't be no scientifically, empirically, but metaphysically this principle and materiality is traditionally known as prime matter. It is the common substantial principle found in all material bodies. It is wholly without determinateness. It in itself it can't exist itself. It is substantial but an incomplete substantial principle. It requires another substantial principle to exist, or rather to give it existence in a determinate body. The other substantial principle with the expression of a human soul is also an incomplete substantial principle. The prime matter is the determinate element, and the substantial form, the form is the determining element. It is also pure potentiality, as it is a pure capacity for existence in a material body. It is the capacity which must be a field of determined and or made into the only existable body by substantial principle other than itself, since the result of the union of this determining principle with prime matter is a single bodily substance. The union itself must be a substantial union. The substantial forcing of two substantial principles into an activity, which is a third thing. This third thing is neither prime matter alone her substantial form of alone, but an existing body of a specific kind. It is that which makes any body a body not actively but passively receiving the impress and union of the substantial form for the whole character of prime matter. It is its passivity, its inertness, and its indifference to become this to become this particular kind of the body, neither the another in a mod. Its indeterminateness, its potentiality. In this way we can affirm the classical Aristotelian assertions. Prime matter is that constituted principle of corporeal substance, which of itself is quite indeterminate and hence can be determined. It took form corporeal substance. The following are the main characteristics of prime matter. Prime matter has the principles of imperfect individualization. Individuations is the adequate distinctions of one being from another. Imperfect individuations is the adequate distinctions of the beings which fall within the same species. Example, the distinctions between different individuals of the human species. Individuality or individuations is the unity of a being which is one in itself and non-multipliable, and individual as is an existing unity of being incapable being multiplied in an individual is one in such a manner that it can be divided individual is an opposition to universals. The universal is a nature common to one and many. It is capable of being realized in any number of individuals of the same class. As a class nature, it is conceived as a unit since it is communicable to many. It is multiplicable. On the other hand, the individual nature is one of for itself alone, so that it is incommunicable to others. The individual nature as an existing individual incommunicable to many is not multiplicable. What is the principles of individuations which makes a being to be an individual? We can distinguish between an extrinsic and an intrinsic principle of individuation. The extrinsic principle is the efficient cause which gives an individual being its existence. The intrinsic principle is the ground of reason in the being itself, which gives individuality to bring so that it is one in itself and not multipliable into many. In other words, what it is in the being itself that makes it to be this individual. Since this question refers to the single individual taken absolutely and without any relations to the others of interesting principles, is called the principles of absolute individuation. It is the interesting principles which gives the unity of individuality to a being. In order to understand the problem rightly, we must compare the individual nature of a being with its specific nature. Individual nature and specific nature. The specific nature of a being is the result of the union of its proximate genus and specific difference of, for instance, the specific nature of human consists of the proximate genus animal and the specific difference rational. The union of the two constitutes the specific nature of human who is a rational animal. The specific nature is alike in all humans. For all humans possess the nature of a rational animal. From this standpoint alone, there would be no difference in the concept of one human and another in existing human. This general specific human nature becomes an individual human nature. This is done through the union of the specific nature with individuality. For instance, Napoleon through his individuality is not merely a man, but this man Napoleon. Still, the question: what is the principle of absolute individualization, which makes an individual to be individual? Is individuality a reality really distinct from the reality of the specific nature? In this case, the principle of absolute individuation would be entirety of the individuality as such and the nature at all, or are the specific nature and individuality and existing individual entity intisibly. It is identical with very little distinction of thought between them, so that they form a metaphysical union. In that case, the formal principle of absolute individuation would be the entirety of the individual nature of essence itself, and there would be only virtual distinction between individuality and specific nature in an individual being. The latter view is preferred, and it can be demonstrated in this way: the specific nature in itself must either be a universal or an individual nature. If it is universal, then the universal nature would exist as a universal. However, universal nature can't exist in the physical order. To things as a universal, therefore the specific nature must exist as an individual nature. But if it comes into existence as an individual nature, the entirety of individuality is entirely superfluous and can no longer make it individual, as it is already an individual nature in itself when it comes into existence. Hence, the individuality of an existing nature is not really distinct but only mentally from the existing nature itself, and the principles of absolute individuations of an individual is the nature of essence itself. In other words, every specific becomes an individualized nature. Therefore individuality is solely a manner of existence of nature. Then the distinction between the specific nature of the individuality of existing individual is a mental or logical distinction. That distinction in concept, because we define them differently, the question is there a ground or reason or foundations in the individuals for making the distinction in concepts. It can be answered in this way: individuality is the same for all beings. It is that which makes a specific nature to become individuated in this particular individual. But this is a great variety of specific natures among existing beings, each of which is individuated in a large of number of existing individual. Here we have the ground of foundations in the things themselves for our making a mental or logical distinction between the nature and the individuality in them. Now when there is such a foundation for making these distinctions, the distinctions neither real nor purely mental but virtual. Therefore there is a virtual distinction between the nature and its individuality. The next question is, what is the principles which individuates a specific nature into a number of individuals or individuals natures. This is the principles of relative individualization. The principles of relative individualization is matter affected or signated by dimensive quantity. It can be explained in this way: since it is the questions of the plurality. The plurality implies divisions and divisibility. The ground of divisibility with also be the ground of principles of plurality. Consequently, the ground or principle of relative individuations must be that ground of divisibility, which enables the specific nature to be multiplied into a plurality of individual natures. Now in physical order, the principles of divisibility is visibility in matter affected by dimension quantity. When a portion of matter is separated from another of plurality is affected in it, which gives rise to a plurality of individuals of the same species. Prime matter Prime matter are the principle of quantity. Quantity is that which is one yet divisible. There are two types of quantity: multitude and magnitude. Multitude is the compositions of the discontinuous parts which are the subject of the same species. Example: multitude of humans. Magnitude is the compositions of the continuous parts of a corporal being. Example: a huge tree. Prime matter as the principle of mutability and passivity. Mutability is the ability to change. There are two kinds of mutability: substantial mutability and accidental mutability. Substantial mutability is the ability to become an individual to of another species. Example: food becoming part of the one who eats it. Accidental mutability is the ability to undergo change of accidents. Example: a change in the weight of body or a change of opinion. Passivity is the ability to receive some perfection of another. Prime matter as the principle of being present to another. Every being necessarily acts. The activity of the spirit is spiritual, which implies luminous self-awareness of knowledge. Hence, the pure spirit of primarily present to itself, and only then is it present to the other. Human knows about the other first. One knows about oneself only afterwards. Hence, human is not pure spirit. There is a human or non-spiritual principle, namely prime matter, which is the principle of being present to another. 3.5. Substantial form. To illustrate the various senses in which the term of is used, we shall consider a few instances of its use. Formative, frequently used as a synonym for outline or shape. We speak of the ovalier form, form of a race course, of the symmetrical form of a drawing. It also means a plan, a program, a record, or form a sheet to be filled. It is often used for good conditions, and a golfer is said to be in form or at the top of this form. The adjective of form, that is formal, is often employed to indicate a certain dignity or a certain decorum, invoking precise details of the dress of the conduct. Thus, we speak of formal dress, of formal occasions, of formal introductions, etc. to a philosopher. आराम से ଟିକେ କଥା ଟିକେ आराम से କଥା
ବାବା ଚଷମା ଫଷମା ନାହିଁ ପାଠ ପଢା ହଉଛି
Form may mean that which determines a thing states in its being, in its essence, in its substance, in its accidents, in its actuality, and determining element is a being in form. When it is spoken or corporeal substance, the term refers to substantial form, which makes a bodily substance can existing reality. Actuality, it is the substantial form, the human, which makes the one bodily being a human being that will states and determines a substance in its actual being, and makes it a substance of this precise kind of essential nature. किए से बाड़ौजी किए से is its substantial form. Of course, human, dog, tree, coal, hydrogen, computers, etc. have accidental form to the human being. Will be of a certain age, sex, size, nationality, conditions of health, temperature, location, and so on. These many of variable forms do not constitute human substance as this kind of actual body. The accidental forms, the substantial forms. Each individual body has only one substantial form, but a plurality of accidental form. Each individual body means a continuous body. Now, any living body is continuous throughout its living structure. Lifeless, which is single continuous quantity, is actuated only by one substantial form. It may be divided into plurality of individual bodies of the same species. Each of the bodies so resulting has its own substantial form. For instance, a rose bush may be cut and divided into several rose bushes. The undivided bush has only one substantial form actually, but in the plant in questions, the bodily substance is capable of division in such a way that life may be preserved in each of the parts. Thus, the plant has the potentiality or capacity for such division, and its substantial form is said to have a parallel potentiality or capacity by reason of its dependence upon the matter of the plant. Hence, we can say that the rose bus is actually one but potentially many similarity. We can also say that the substantial form of the rose bush is actually one potentially many substantial forms of the human cells, and that the most animals are never multiple either actually or potentially. Each of such forms of the necessarily one substantial form having no capacity for a division according to division of the body structure matter on which intrinsically or extrinsically it depends. In a living body, the life principle soul enterichi is the substantial form which this form is divided out by death. The remaining structure of substantially different from the living body. The corpus of a human is not a human. It is a package of various inorganic, non-living substances, and naturally tends to break up on decomposes. Hence, a corpus is not a single substance but a mixture of many substances, whereas the living human actualized by the spiritual substantial from soul is a single human substance. Substantial change involves in acquisitions incoming of a new substantial simultaneous loss or outgoing of the old substantial form where the prime matter remains when a living body is changed to a dead body. There occurs a substantial change again when hydrogen and oxygen are not the same are brought together in due proportion. The gases are changed into water. The properties of water are not the same as those of the gases. Here we know that the changes is a change of substance. The two substances have become single compound substances called water. Therefore, substances manifest their character by their properties. When the properties are wholly changed, we know that the substance is changed inasmuch as the change results in the productions of a new substances. It is generations the same change inasmuch it is results in the loss of the previous substantial form. It is corruptions. The generations of one substances is the corruptions of another, the vice versa. When a compound substance such as water is generated by the fusion of union of other substances, we have a compound. A compound is a substantial unit. The substantial forms of the elements joined together in a compound enter in the compound in a virtual manner and not actually. For example, the substantial form the water is two substantial form the distinct from the form of hydrogen and the form of oxygen, which are the constitutive elements of water. The forms of these elements can be generated again from water. In other words, these elements are latently or potentially present in the water and this potentially or latent presence of the elements in the water is not a purely passive thing since the water is capable of reduced to the gases. The potential presence of the elements is a kind of active potentiality which is called virtual. Thus, we can say that the elements in a compound are present in the compound not actually but virtually. To be more precise, the substantial forms of the elements are virtually present in the substantial chemical compound. To have new bodily substance, we must have old bodily substance. These bodies come from other bodies built by generations by and corruptions. However, the process of generation can proceed in an infinite series of bodies from other bodies and other from other bodies and so on for a natural infinity in anything limited or infinite. finite is the contradictions. Hence the first bodily beings can't have come into existence by a generation, that is by way of substantial change. The first finite being must have come into existence by an absolute productions by the infinite power without any material precoexist. Such a productions is called creations. It is the productions of a being in its entirely out of nothing. It is productio totius rei ex nihilo ea subjecti. It means the product of a thing is entirety out of nothingness, either of self or of subject. Nothingness refer to the absence of all pre-existing materials. The calling of being out of nothingness is the exercise of absolute or unconditioned and on conditions and unlimited power, and such power is exercised only by the absolute and infinite being. Substantial form is an inner principle of primary actualizations of determinations of a being. It is the inner principle of specific perfections. It is active and it is determining. It makes a body actual in a definite specific kind of actual body lines. The result of the substantial union of substantial form with prime matter is called second matter or materia secunda. Materia secunda is an existing bodily substance. Substantial form is the root and source of bodily actually of substantial determinateness of activity, where prime matter is wholly potentially indeterminate, inactive or inert kinds of substantial form. Pure substantial form is the inner principles of primary determinations which constitutes the whole being. Example agents component substantial form is the inner principles of primary determinations which is only a constructive principles of being. Example substantial form of all material being. Substance component substantial form is the inner principle of primary determination which is itself has its act of existing. Example the human soul. Non-substituting component substantial form is the inner principle of primary determinations which exist and can exist only insofar as it is in union with matter. Example animal forms, vegetative forms and inanimate forms.